In this video, we're going to be taking a look at using InkScape with the free InkStitch extension that will convert our vector file into an embroidery file. Now, we'll begin by importing the piece of artwork that was posted to our Facebook group. It's called Learning InkScape and InkStitch. This is the logo, so we'll go ahead and open it up, and we'll take a look at it here. So here's our logo, and we want to convert this into an embroidery file. Now let me preface this video by saying you are probably much better off to hire this done than to try and use InkScape and InkStitch to convert this into an embroidery file. It's not that you can't do it, it's just why would you take the time to do it when you can get it done so incredibly cheap and quick. So that's my 2 cents. I used to have an embroidery business way back in the day, and I always had my embroidery files digitized because they could do it quicker, a better job. They, you know, you can go on Fiverr right now and probably get this converted for like $5. I pay my digitizer now if I do need to have something digitized. I pay my digitizer $7 flat fee, no matter what the design is. So I mean, and he usually turns around in 1 business day, maybe 2 at the most, but he's usually very quick, and so there is a lot to learn when it comes to digitizing an image. You know, we have to know how to use Inkscape to convert it into a vector format that we can use, and then we have to understand how we need to manipulate that for InkStitch to then generate what we need it to generate. So that's my 2 cents. Pay to have it done. But if you want to learn how to do it, I'm here. I'm going to walk you through it. One thing that I thought was really interesting about InkStitch is InkStitch has been around for years and years and years, but if you go on YouTube right now and you look up InkStitch video tutorials, first of all, in my opinion, there are very few good ones out there, and interestingly enough, as far as a video tutorial that will take a logo like this and show you step by step from beginning to end an entire design, it's like finding a unicorn. When I was trying to learn how to use InkStitch, that didn't exist, and so that's part of the reason why I'm making these videos, is to kind of help you along here. This logo, while it's not a complicated logo, it's also no easy feat to convert it into an embroidery file. Like, it's going to take some know-how, some time. So with that said, let's just dive in here and show you what we got to do here. Okay, so we select our bitmap, and the first thing that we need to do is we need to convert it into a vector file. So if we go in outline mode here in InkScape, if you go to the view menu and choose display mode, you could toggle between normal and outline. I have a keyboard shortcut set up that toggles between those 2 views for me. But I've got my bitmap. I come down here, I choose trace bitmap, and you kind of play with these settings. So we do a single scan, brightness cutoff, our threshold. We can move our threshold to not see our logo, to see our logo, play around with speckles and smooth and optimize if you like. But let's just go ahead and hit apply, and when I do that, you'll see it update over here on the left. Ta-da! You see it? That's been updated. And this is now our vector file that we can utilize to convert it into an embroidery file. Okay, so let's start with maybe our fish. We're going to start our with converting our fish into embroidery. So the first thing that we need to do is double click on what was created for us, and you can see that this is what we have. We have one single path, and We can't have that. We need individual paths to be able to convert these into the stitches that we need. Now, InkStitch, and I'm going to show it to you, but you don't ever want to use this function. But InkStitch does have a function that I thought was cool, but it's really not. And that is if you go to extensions and come down here to InkStitch, come down here to Tools Fill, there's a function in here called Break Apart Fill Objects. Okay? So when I click on that, watch what happens. We get these two options. You have either simple or complex. We'll choose simple and we'll hit apply. It goes doot, 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 and it does something for us. But you see here in our layers palette where we just had one path, now we have all kinds of paths, right? So like for our letter L here, our A, this little piece of the fish, where this was all one, now it's literally all broken up into individual paths. Now, where there's paths that were welded together, it doesn't break those, right? But all the paths that were separate but yet combined as one have now all been split apart. Now, from that perspective, you're like, well, that's cool because that's what we need to convert to an embroidery file. And that's true, but it does something that we don't want it to do in the process. So this little squiggly line up top, let's just double click on it. What did it create? 750 million nodes. Now let me back up a couple steps here so we could see. Let's back up a couple of steps. So this is our original trace, and what I did was I just took this and I copied it down here, and then I did that break fill objects apart. But let's look at this right here, this little squiggly line, by double clicking on it. Now what do you see? You only see a couple hundred. You don't see 424 million. So when we're dealing with vector artwork and converting it to embroidery, we don't want 100 million nodes. This is a lot of nodes, but a lot of these are necessary. A lot of them are not necessary, but a lot of them are necessary. For example, just a real quick example, you have a node here, this node here, this node here, and this node here. This is not necessary. So if I were to Control Alt and click on it, you see our path barely changed. See that? Okay. So it's going to be a lot easier to modify this than all those hundreds and hundreds of nodes that we had previously when we used that function in InkStitch. So, but we still have a problem in that this is still all one piece, and remember, I need it all broken up into individual pieces. So, how do we go about doing that? That's our next step. And the way we do that is fairly simple. All we're going to do is go up here to Path, and we're going to choose the Break Apart option. That's the same option that this does the same thing that InkStitch does, but we're doing it in InkScape. So now you can see we have even more paths than we had previously. But now you could also see that we just kind of have this big black blob, right? So let's take our letter A here for an example. And if we choose Path and we choose Combine, now we have our A separated, our L is separated, this little swooshy swoosh is separated. And what we're going to do here is we're going to select all of this, Shift key, our little swoosh here. We're going to use our keyboard shortcut, Control K to combine. And so now this becomes one. Okay. Now we're going to toggle our view, Alt Q. And now what we need to do is the inside of our fish, our outside, shift click our outside, and then we need to shift click our head and combine it, and then the eye has an inner and outer, and combine it, Control K. Okay, so now if we go and toggle our view again, now we have our separate pieces, just like we did when we used the break fill objects apart in InkStitch, but now we retained, double click, the nodes. When you break apart in Inkscape, it does not add any nodes. And so ultimately, that's what we're after. This is going to be a lot easier to edit when we convert this into an embroidery file. All right, so what do we do next? Well, the next thing is what I like to do is I like to organize. So I'm going to add a couple of layers here, and let's call it fish parts. So there's fish parts, and then our next major thing will be our fish outline. I don't have a reason why sometimes you enter a layer name and it doesn't take. I don't know why. Okay, so we're going to select anything that's a part of our fish and put it on fish parts. Just drag and drop into the fish parts layer. And let's turn off fish parts so we can just see it a little bit better. And then this, right? This little squiggly line in this part and this part, we need to break it apart. So I'm going to go into outline mode, and we need to break this apart. So how do we do that? Well, let's double click on the path. We're going to select that node there, shift click this node right here, and we could use this. Break path at selected nodes, but we're not going to. We're going to use our keyboard shortcut as Shift B. B as in boy. Okay, we'll come down here, click here, Shift B. We need to click here and Shift B, and then right here and Shift B. Boom. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to separate all those pieces that we just busted up. So path break apart, Shift Control K for future use. Okay, so now this squiggly line can be on fish parts. Goodbye. And then this piece can be on fish parts. Okay, now this is a little bit different. This piece right here, and this piece here, and this piece here all need to be combined. So we're going to hit Control K. So that's all been combined. Now it can go on fish parts. Okay, so then that means what's left of our fish here can all go. Let's go ahead and switch over to our selection tool here. So what's left of our fish outline there's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces that can all go up here to fish outline. But these cannot be individual pieces, so we are going to combine those. Okay, so now we just have one. Now the next step is, well, our outline here has some big gaping holes which we cannot have. So how do we fix that? Well, all we do is select the two nodes that have an issue, and then we could use this function up here. Join selected end nodes with a new segment. And you can see there, now we have a new segment there. And then where we have a gap here, we could do the same thing. But we want to use a keyboard shortcut. Get in the habit of using keyboard shortcuts. It will save time. Time is money. Alt-J. Does the same thing. Okay? So if you just remember those keyboard shortcuts, it makes future editing much easier. Okay? So now, as you can see, we have all of our outlines, gaps filled in, and now we just have basically one shape. We have an inside and an outside. Now, in order to create satin stitches, we need something called rails. So it needs a start and an end, like a railroad track. Well, all we have right now is a single path. So we need to define our start and end point. And the way we do that is with our break apart. So we have our path, right? So if I select this node and shift click this one, and then hit Shift B, I've broken those nodes right there. So what I've done is I've created a start point, I've created an end point. We're ready to convert into embroidery stitches. So if I go to Extensions and choose InkStitch, Params, going forward, I will use my keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt-P to get into Params. But there we go. We get into params here, and we have an issue. Why? This happens so often that I wanted to point this out, and you can see we don't have options for satin. I get this question a lot. I can't convert to satin. Well, there's a reason you can't convert to satin. You cannot convert any object to satin that has a fill. Satin doesn't work with fill. Satin only works with stroke. Okay? That's how InkStitch differentiates between what needs to be filled with fill stitches and what needs to have satin stitches. So, we're going to select our entire design, give it no fill, but we're going to shift click one of these colors right there. And then I don't like my outline quite that thick, so we'll come over here, stroke style, and we'll do 0.3 of a millimeter. That's just what I like. You can still see it, but now it has a stroke. So now if I go into, let me select my image, or this outline here, and go into params. Control-Alt-P is my keyboard shortcut. Now you'll notice we have a new tab, satin column, create custom satin column, and the software will go ahead and create beautiful satin stitches. Doesn't that look lovely? Well, it doesn't look lovely yet, and there's a reason, and I deliberately did this to show you step by step by step by step. There's things that we have to know in order to get the results that we want to get. So we're close. We do have satin stitches, but they're mighty ugly. So let me explain why they are so ugly. InkStitch is a bit of a finicky little thing, and it is doing things in a certain way that actually makes sense, but we have to give it just a little bit more information. So when we're dealing with satin columns, there are things called rungs, okay? Now, you'll see lots of videos out there in the InkStitch world about rungs in satin columns, and I'm here to tell you, do not use rungs. It's unnecessary. You don't need rungs. You should never use rungs. I don't care what anyone else says. I don't know why rungs exist in InkStitch. It's crazy. But I'm off my soapbox now. Take my word for it. You don't want to use rungs. All right. So what do we do? If we're not going to use rungs, what do we do? What rungs does, if rungs exist, okay, then InkStitch will use our rungs to determine the angle of our stitches. So you saw in the previous example, the angle of our stitches were all whacked out because we didn't have rungs. Okay, so if we don't have rungs, then InkStitch will resort to the nodes of our rails and use that to determine the angle of our stitches. But it needs to make sure that if we're going to go that route, all of our nodes along the rails have to have a buddy. Otherwise, InkStitch gets lost, doesn't know where it's going, and it flies off the rails. So, for example, we broke it right here. So this has a node, his buddy is right here, but we have a node here, but he has no friend. So InkStitch almost immediately is like, what in the world am I supposed to do here? So if we just add him a buddy right across the hall, okay, now he has a friend. InkStitch says, okay, that's your buddy. So our stitches are going to be at this sharp angle here going into the corner. Coming out of the corner, we have this, but this guy has no friend. He needs a friend. This guy here, we need a friend right across the hall, not kitty corner, because now our stitches will be straight across, not at an angle. Okay? Now, sometimes we don't need a node at all. We can just hit Control-Alt and get rid of it altogether. Okay? So I go back and forth. Sometimes I'll just delete the node if I don't think it's necessary. Necessary. And then sometimes I'll just add a node and delete that one. We don't need that for sure. We don't need that. We don't need that. And all I'm doing is hitting Control Alt and clicking on the node in question. So there we'll add one by double clicking and Control Alt to get rid of. He has a partner. Now this guy here looks strange. See how he's a diamond? That's a square. Nope, doesn't matter. But that is something we'll run across here in a moment. You'll see why I questioned that a little bit. Have we got a problem here? No, we don't have a problem there, but we definitely don't need that. All right, so we're just kind of going through here. I'm deciding what I need, what I don't need as I'm going along. You'll learn where you need nodes and where you don't need nodes. I've done enough where I could just look at it and say, hey, you know what? I don't really need that. So we can get rid of it. I don't really need that. We could get rid of it. Okay. Now this right here, we do need. It's going to pair up with that. This right here we need. It's going to pair up with that. And then we're going to straighten it out. So our embroidery stitches are going to be real sharp into the corner. And then it's going to straighten back out here. And then all the way through, we're good to go there. So this is going to line up here. This is going to line up here, which is fine. But then I want it to straighten out right there. Okay. Do I need that one? Not really. Do I need this one? Not really. I will go ahead and add a couple because we're going sharp into the corner here. So this is going to match with that. This is going to match with that. This doesn't have a buddy. Now he does. And we'll straighten it out. So we see that? We straighten it out. This we don't really need. Although, you see how much our path moved? So I will undo that and say, yep, we do need that, but we don't need that. This is fine. This is really kind of a strange anomaly there, but those two pair up. We'll pair these two up, and I don't need that one. Right across the hall, unless there's a good reason not to. Sometimes there is. Right across the hall. We don't want it at an angle like that. Don't need that or that or that or that. Okay, right across the hall. We don't need any of those. Boop. We'll go ahead and leave that one, but we don't need this one. We can leave that one, that's fine. And then figure out here what we need here. So that one can go there and that one can go there. Beautiful. So all of them have pairs now, and I think more or less this is going to give us the result that we're expecting. But there's one thing we can check. If I select all the nodes, and I look down at the bottom of my screen, it says that we have 63 of 63 nodes. And that immediately tells me, Houston, we have a problem. Because we're not supposed to have an odd number of nodes. Remember I said in order to create satin columns and use our nodes to determine where our stitch angles are, we need even numbers of nodes, and we don't have it. So let's go ahead and look at it in params. I want to show you something here. It is going to show us satin. Beautiful. Okay, so this showed us exactly what I wanted it to show us. So it starts off here on the right-hand side, stitches beautifully, 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 beautifully right here. Very unbeautiful right there. Okay, so what that means is that's where our problem exists. Our problem exists right there. So if we look at the situation, we estimate our problem to be right here. If I select those two nodes, what does it show? It shows that we only have two nodes selected. That's a little unexpected. Let's select these two. That only shows that we have two. What about these two? That we only have two. So the problem is over here. So if I select all of these nodes, how many should it show at the bottom of our screen? Right? We should have 5. And we do only have 5, so that's good. What about this one? That one's only 1. That one's only 1. What is the world is happening here? Somewhere we have an extra. Ooh, look at there, look at there, look at there. I selected those two nodes, and look at there. It says we have 3. Can't have 3 because I only have 2 nodes selected. So there's either a node on top of a node here, no, or there's a node on top of a node here. And sure enough, there it is. So that's where the problem was. So now if we go back into params, we should see that we have proper satin stitches all the way through our design. And sure enough, we have proper satin stitches through and through. Now, we haven't talked about adding underlay. We haven't talked about adding any push-pull compensation. You know, there's a whole nother side of digitizing. But in terms of creating satin stitches, we're there. So that takes care of that. Let's go back to our layers palette here. And our fish outline layer is a done dealio. That part of it is correct. So now we can come in here to fish parts and take a look at it. Well, the first thing we want to do, of course, is we want to select all of our elements that have no fill because we're doing all satin stitches. We're going to shift click any color and we're going to change the outline to 0.3 of a millimeter. And there we go. So now we can convert these elements to satin. So let's start with our eyeball. How do we take care of that? Well, we need a start and an end point. So we're just going to make it up. So we're going to choose this to be our start and end point, Shift B to break at nodes. And then we have to make sure that our nodes have partners, partner, partner, partner. Done. Convert that to satin. And it should, in theory, go ahead and be a beautiful satin. Again, we haven't talked about underlay or compensation or any of that, but as far as converting to satin stitches, it did exactly what we expected it to. So that is what we call done and dusted. All right, so what do we want to tackle next? Let's tackle the big squiggly. So what do we got to do here? We have an open segment, which is fine, right? So that's our start point or end point. So now we need a start or end. So we're going to come over here and hit Shift B, and then we'll go into params and convert it to satin. I'm just going to do quick and dirty satin. I didn't focus at all on my nodes, but you could see we do have satin stitches, but you can also see they are quite ugly. So now we'll go back in and take a look at our node situation. So he's got a buddy, he's got a buddy, he's got a buddy, he doesn't, now he does. He's got a buddy, he doesn't, now he does. And sometimes I will do this. Sometimes I won't necessarily delete any nodes, but if we need to add some nodes so that all the existing nodes have a friend, then we'll just do that real quick. Like this one, okay, this one we're going to get rid of. So that's good, that's good. He needs a friend, he needs a friend. That's fine, although I'm going to move him up here and delete that one. So when we're doing a tight curve, I like to have them directly across from each other. So we'll add a friend, add a friend, add a friend, delete that one. That's good. We'll delete that one, add a friend, he's got a buddy. We don't need that one. So he's got a buddy, he's got a buddy. We'll add a friend here and get rid of that one. It's a little bit more directly across the hall there. And let's see here. So this gets a very dramatic at the end. How are we going to do this? Because that does get really dramatic, but that's fine. We're just going to add a node and add a node. So this is going to be a really sharp angle, then this becomes a really sharp angle. So yes, so we should have, that should now, at least in theory, I think we pretty well got it all figured out here. So now if we go into params, should be satin stitches, and it should be pretty satin stitches. Fairly pretty satin stitches. Sure enough, there you go. Fairly pretty satin stitches. Okay, so that piece is taken care of. All right, so, and what I like to do is as I finish a piece, bye-bye. Because it's to me, it's just a little bit easier not to have all that stuff in our way. So here, same thing. We're going to come right here and Shift B. Come over here, Shift B. He needs a friend, he needs a friend, he needs a friend, he needs a friend. And he already has a friend. So beautiful. So Control-Alt-P. Now normally, I would just go through and make all the edits and convert all my objects to satin in one go. But you can see, there you go, right? That's what I would normally do. So maybe from here on out, we'll make all the edits and do that and just convert them all at one time. So we'll add a node there, break it, break it. He needs a friend, friend. So he needs a friend, he needs a friend, he needs a friend. Does this look like a double? It is a double. It looked like a double to me, so now it's a single. And there we go. So I think that's taken care of. So we'll leave that alone. Now we'll come over here. Same thing. We'll double click here. Shift B. I always do that right at the point here. Shift B. Yeah, let's do that. We'll add a node, add a node, add a node. These guys need friends. We'll add one there. We'll get rid of this. He has a friend. I'm just going to move his friend over a little bit. That's good. Do the same thing here. Get rid of that one. We'll add one there. We'll get rid of that. That's okay. That's okay. Is there two there? Nope, there's not two there. That's okay. That's okay. We'll add another note for him. We'll move him over. We'll add one right there for that. That's fine. Add one there. That's fine. Moving on down, we will add one there, break it, add one, add a buddy for him, and him, and him, and get rid of this one because we don't need it. That's fine. I'm going to add one there at this point and this point, and then that way we can get rid of that and that. That's fine. There we go. And yes, did I break it there? I did not. Didn't think I did. So we're good there. Did I break it here? I did. All right, so that's taken care of. Okay, so let's go ahead and just convert all of these to satin. Should all be proper satin stitches all the way through. Let's just take a quick gander. We're good. We were good up until there. So we're going to go ahead and choose apply and quit, but there is something not right here. And it's probably, oh, let's see. I forgot a buddy. I forgot a buddy. My bad. So back to satin column, create custom satin column. Yes, that takes care of that. Okay. So now all of these bits have been converted to satin. So now if we look at that, just double check that real quick. And I'm happy with all of that. So we'll hit apply and quit, and then we could just go ahead and turn that off. And then if we turn off one of these selected items, then everything that's selected goes off. So, and I know we've already converted this. So we'll go ahead and turn it off, and that brings us to this. So here, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and break it right here. So break it, up here, break it there. He's got a buddy. He doesn't. He does. He doesn't. So we're going to add a buddy for him. Real sharp buddy. And now that should all be taken care of. And then for the bottom here, let's see, we're going to have to break this apart. Shift Control K. And what that does is that actually breaks those two bits a piece. So we'll go ahead and combine those. So that breaks this and this separate, okay, which we need that to be separate. So we're going to zoom in a little bit here, add a node, and then, yep, so we'll get rid of this and we'll add a node. So he has a pair, he has a pair, that. How do I want to handle this? I think what we're going to do is we're going to close this off. Remember, Alt-J. So we'll make that connection there. And then we'll break it here. Okay, so that should, I think, be okay. So it's a little bit jumbled up there, but let's look at it. I think that'll be all right. We'll switch over to custom satin column. First piece is okay. Yeah, that'll work. I'm happy with that. All right, so that's taken care of. And then what are we doing here? It is separate, so we need to break it here. He's got a pair, he's got a pair. So let's go ahead and convert to satin. Sure enough, there we go. That's all now satin. And so here on this one, we need to close up shop, Alt-J. We can come in here and give it a little bendy bend just to soften that straight line a little bit. Double click, we have a pair. We'll go ahead and move that here, that's fine. We'll add one for that, and this, and this. We're just double clicking to add a node. Then he needs one, and he's got one. Good to go. So you can see, once you really get to knowing exactly what to do when, it does go pretty fast, and you do get the expected results that you want. Apply and quit. All right. So what that tells me is all of that now can be turned off because it's all been converted. So that leaves us with text, right? So what are we going to do here? Well, let's start with our letter L. We are going to zoom in tight, break it there, add a node there. We will add a node here. We don't need this one. We don't need that one or that one or that one or that one. So I'm just going to get rid of the ones that we don't actually need. So that is good. Now this one I like to go right in the corner with. So that's good. Is there an extra node there? There is. See? Thought there was. But then this guy, he's going to need a buddy right there. And then we'll straighten it out there. He's got a friend. And we will break it right there. So that, in theory, should convert to satin stitches pretty well. Custom satin column. And indeed, it does stitch pretty well. Okay, so moving on. What are we going to do with our letter A? Now, our letter A has some special issues. And pretty easy to take care of, but it does have some special issues. So what we need to do is we need to break it apart in a couple of spots. So right here, we're going to Shift B, we're going to break it there. And then we're just going to kind of draw an imaginary line right there and another imaginary line. Actually, we're not going to do it right there. We're going to do like an imaginary straight line. So right there and then straight down like so. So we're going to select that one, this one, this one, and this one, and Shift B. We're going to break everything right there. And now what we have to do is we have to break all of that, Shift Control K. And now you're going to see what we actually got here. So first of all, we have this piece, very interesting. And then we have this piece and this piece. So I need those two pieces to become one. So we'll combine those two pieces to one. Then I have this piece, and then I have this piece. And I need those to become one. Okay? So now what I need to do, so for this piece, it's good to go. We'll add a node because he needs a friend, and that's ready to convert to satin. This piece here, we broke it right there, so that's fine. So we'll do that. I want one right there and right here. I don't know that I need that one. We'll put one there, there, there. No, we don't need this one there. Okay, so now that should be ready to go to convert to satin. And then over here, what are we doing over here? So, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Now, let's just leave it. Let's just leave it. We're going to make it work. So I'm just going to add in the buddies that we need. And get rid of the extra hangers on that we don't need. And break it right there. Okay, so now all of these elements should be ready to convert to satin. So let's take a look. Satin column, custom satin column. Sure enough, that first piece looks good. Our A looks got a problem, and this has a problem. Or this doesn't have a problem, but our A definitely has a problem. So let's take a look at that. We did something that we shouldn't have. Let's see. So that's fine. I select those two, and you see there's three. So we have a node on top of a node right there. My bad. And now, if we take a look at that, we do in fact, that all should be converted into proper satin stitches. And yes, it is in fact all converted to proper satin stitches. But we have an issue. And this is the part of InkStitch that really frustrates me because it's a very labor intensive thing, and yeah, there's just no easy way to do it. And I promise you, you won't see anybody else even show you this that I've seen. But it's so frustrating. So you notice our A, the tail stitches first, and then the inside, the little loop of our A, and then the next piece. But look at where our loop ends and our next piece begins. You see that? Our loop ends right here at top, bottom, but then jumps over to the next segment. It jumps to the far right. Okay? And that is not how this is supposed to stitch out. So InkStitch does have an option for us where we can select the object that we want to stitch first, hold the Shift key down, the object we want to stitch second, and then the object that we want to stitch third, and then we come up to Extensions, InkStitch, Edit, and it says Restack Objects in the order of selection. And it does that quite well. Okay, so the way InkStitch stitches is the lowermost object, and then the next one, and then the next one. So that part works really well. So let's look at that back in params again. But the one thing that does frustrate me is if we know that these are stitching in sequential order, why then is it going to do that second segment starting on the right? It finishes over here on the left side, but the next segment, it's starting over here on the right. And I wish it would automatically start at the closest position. But it doesn't do it. It doesn't do it that way. So how do we make that segment start over here on the left? Well, first of all, we have to select just that segment by itself and add into params. So that's step number one. And so the way we can do this is we could choose swap rails. And so now you see it stitches from left to right. And it starts at the top of what we're doing. So that part's pretty cool. It ends at the bottom. Okay. So that part is pretty cool just by choosing swap rails. But now I want to delve into something a little bit more deeper. And that is if I take the first two bits here and I go into, well, actually let's just look at this piece by itself, because we are going to have to make an adjustment here. So it starts at the bottom, comes around to the top, and notice that this is stopping, the cursor stops at the bottom. The next piece is starting at the top. So I would prefer that this cursor ends at the top because that's where the next piece begins. But how do I make that end at the top? Well, if we choose swap rails, that doesn't help us. So what if we were to reverse the first rail? Well, it's starting at the stitching from the top instead of the bottom, so that's not going to help us. What if we reverse the second rail? Starts at the bottom. Where does it finish? Finishes at the bottom. That's not going to help us. So what's the last one? Reverse both rails. Well, that's not going to help us. So we will reverse the second rail. That did not get us where we needed to be, but the only other option that we haven't chosen is we haven't chosen to swap a rail here, or reverse rails, I should say, and swap rails. So what if we did that? Well, that starts from the top, so we reverse the first rail. So we're starting from the bottom, and notice now we're ending up top. So we got there, but there is no like magical thing. You just have to try the various options, and now this piece is ending at the top exactly where the next piece begins. Okay, so that's good. Now this, if you remember, this ended at the bottom. So this piece here, when we go to stitch it out, we would like it to stitch from the top like it is, but we would like it if it's stitched from the bottom. And you can see it's stitching from the top. So if we choose swap rails, it's going to start from the right, so we have to reverse the first rail. And now, with swap and reverse, notice the start point is from the bottom, right where we ended the previous piece. Now that, to me, is just absolutely nutty. Absolutely nutty. I feel like that should be automatic. A lot of other embroidery software, it is automatic. When you're going from element to element to element, we're stopping right where we're leaving off from the first one. So there, we're at top, and then the next piece, we start from the top, and then it's going to finish at the bottom, and we're starting our next piece from the bottom. Nice, fluid, smooth motion. There you go. Now, the only thing that we really hadn't talked about is we have our A busted up into 3 pieces. But each piece is starting and stopping at the exact same start and end point. So we'll go ahead and choose apply and quit. So what we may choose to do is rather than have each piece start and stop at the exact same endpoint, is we might just bring this in ever so slightly. You can't really see it in really very well, but that's just overlapping a little bit. So now when this piece stitches, you see how it's just going to cover that ever so slightly, and we just do the same thing here. Move that rail in a little bit, move this rail in a little bit, so when this stitches, it covers it up just a little bit. So now let's just go ahead and select all those pieces so you can see what I'm talking about here. And you should be able to see it pretty good in params here. So you see how this is just overlapping a little bit right there, and the same thing, just overlapping a couple stitches there, and then we know for sure there won't be any gap there. Okay, so that's just how I would do it, just to kind of cover myself a little bit. All right, so next up we need to break this, select those two, Shift B, and then yes, we need to break the whole kit and caboodle apart, Shift Control K. So now this piece is indeed separate from this piece down here. You see that's totally separate. So we do need to fill in our gap here, Alt J. So now the gap is filled in. So we'll come over here to our tip, Shift B, we'll add a node, We'll get rid of that one because I don't think we need it. We can add a node, we can get rid of that one because I don't think we need it. We can add a node, and we'll get rid of that one and that one. Yeah, let's just go ahead and get rid of those two. I don't think we need them. We can go ahead and add a node there, but we don't need that one. Or that one, 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 or that one. We'll go ahead and add one there, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that, and that. Then right here, we'll add Shift B, and let's go ahead and add one, and add one, and take one away. So that now should convert to satin stitches the way we want it. And let's take a look here. So far, so good. All the way across. All right, that looks good. So we'll choose Apply and Quit. And then right here, we'll do Shift B. Here we'll do Shift B. We'll add a node there and there and get rid of that. This is good to go to convert to satin. No, it says no, and that's because something is not broken right there. So there was no satin options, so that's because even though I did break it, it didn't actually break. So now we can go back in there and we will see satin options because the conditions have been met. So there we go. Now, I do want to just show you something real quick. We're going to go into contour underlay and add some contour underlay just to illustrate this point. So you see how far the stitches are overhanging our contour underlay. We can add some pull compensation. Let's do 50% on each side. And now do you see how much more the stitches are overhanging? So this little piece is really tiny, so I'm just going to add 10% to push those stitches out just a little bit more. Okay, and then I don't think we really need that contour underlay, so we'll get rid of that. But yeah, we can push those stitches out by adding a little bit more pull compensation right here. That will make that element, those stitches, even wider yet. So so they won't be so thin. So I think that'll look good. Okay, so trying to think what I want to do here. We already have our A created, So let's just go ahead and hit Control D. We can copy that over here. And let's go ahead and right here, where our A would be, let's break those 2 points. And then let's go ahead and break that path and get rid of those elements of our A, because we don't need those any longer. What do we do here? Yes. So we can get rid of that, and we can get rid of that, and we'll just slide this one in. If we hold our control key down, it'll constrain to a perfectly horizontal position. We'll turn off snapping for the moment. Okay. So we'll leave that like that. All right, so now what we have to do, now this is the part that, frankly, on this particular logo is challenging. We have to think carefully about exactly how this is going to work in terms of stitching. So we're focusing on breaking each letter up into its individual pieces. So we know just real easy by looking at it, this P, we're going to break it there, and up here we're going to break it there, and then the E we're going to break it here, and then this one here we're going to break it there. Over here we're going to break it where it connects to this E, then back up here we're going to break it there. Yeah, let's see here. Let's break it here. All right, so then this E is already separated from that A. So far, so good. So now let's take both of those, all of those, and let's just choose path, break apart. Okay, now we have a lot more pieces. I didn't mean to break that apart. So we'll choose path and combine because we're good to go there. But here, we have to select all these bits of our E and combine it. And then we have to select the bits of our L and combine those. And then our E again, we're not going to do our E again. So we're just going to go ahead and delete those pieces. I'm not sure why. Okay, that's the end there. Okay, maybe here. We need to break that apart, because we don't need this piece of our E. So we'll go ahead and delete that. And then we do need all of our bits of our P. So we'll go ahead and combine that. Now the reason that we don't need that secondary E is because we're going to convert this E into embroidery stitches, and then when we do that, we'll just copy it over. Okay? So I think the E is probably going to be our next easiest letter to convert. So let's go ahead and double click on it. And in fact, we might find it useful to, let's go ahead and name this now, letter L. And then I am going to go ahead and turn off our letter L, just so we're, now this here is our letter A. I don't think it's a bad idea to label what is what here. So this is what we're focusing on, converting that into embroidery. So what we need to do is we need to connect that, Alt-J. We can't have the gap. We'll give it a little schmoozing there. And I'm just going to add a node. And see how when we do that, it kind of like smooths that out now. So that part's good. So the next thing we need to do is break. We're going to add a node there. We're going to break it right there. And we're going to break it right there. Now this is the part that can be a little bit challenging to kind of wrap your brain around. And I'm just trying to think exactly how I want to demonstrate it. But let's go ahead and hit Shift Control P, or K rather. And what that does is it breaks up our pieces into individual pieces of our E. And so what we want is when we go to embroider this, we're going to start here on the inside of our E, and we're going to come around, back down, and loop through. Okay, so that's how it's going to stitch. It's going to come through here and down and around. But how do we represent that? Well, the way we represent it is if we click here, you can see this piece here, okay? And we also have this piece up here. So the way this is going to be represented, this right here, the end of this, we want that and we want this. So we want those two pieces combined, first of all. Those are going to become one. And then what we're going to do is we are going to combine those two. Okay, this is the part, remember, I told you it's going to be complicated. It's not going to make a whole lot of sense right now. But so this right here, this piece here is coming around all the way through, and then we have this piece here coming around and all the way through. Well, let's go ahead and connect those two. And so we're going to combine those two, Control K. So now that's one path. Okay. So now let's just see what it looks like if we convert it into embroidery right now. We do have a satin option. And it's going to start here on the outside, which we actually don't want. We want it to start on the inside. So let's swap those rails. And so you see here, it did start on the inside, but you can also see there's some issues with our nodes, but then it finishes out okay. So let's go back in and take a look at that. So it does get kind of murky because of how our nodes are. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring this in a little bit. And then this, I'm just going to slide up just enough so I can see that one. Okay. I'll go ahead and delete that. I do want to see my transformation handles, because you see how that looks a little, that little hook there, I'd rather not have that like that. So we just straighten that out a little bit. That's a pretty easy fix. Okay, so now you see those two paths are overlapping. So it's going to start here and it's going to work its way around. So this needs a partner. This needs a partner. This needs a partner. This needs a partner. That needs a partner, or it needs to go away. Let's maybe make that go away. And just add one there. Add one there. Let's go ahead and make that go away. And then, so now we're coming down. We don't really need that one, but see how this piece here, we don't really need it, I don't feel. These two line up. These two can line up. Those two line up. Those two line up. Those two line up. Beautiful. So now, when we go into params, that is going to look proper. And then when we come across with those satin stitches on top, see how it covers up the cap there? Bada boom, bada bing. See how nice that is? Okay, but getting there, to me, takes a little bit of work. Okay, so that takes care of that. Where's our letter L? We'll turn on our letter L here. And so here's our letter L. So remember before we have to Alt-J to fill the segment. And our L is going to be a lot like our E. So it's going to start here on the inside. It's going to loop around and down and through. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and delete that. And we'll go ahead and show our transformation handles. So we can adjust this a little bit more. I am going to go ahead and I want to be able to adjust this separately. So I want to be able to adjust this separate from the backside there. So we're going to kind of just straighten that out a little bit, and I'm happy with that. So we want to do, this is, if you think about the L, it's just like a big E, isn't it? So same thing. So we're going to break it right there. We're going to break it somewhere along there. Okay. And then we do need to break the entire path apart because we need to add a segment to this. So there is that. So we need to add a segment from there to there. Okay, so Alt-J, that adds the segment. Okay, now that we've added that segment, we can go ahead and delete those. And now you can see what we need to do. We need to bring this in so it overlaps. Let's go ahead and show our transformation handles so we can adjust that a little bit. So now it's overlapping. So now it's going to come up and through and down and around. And that's exactly what we need it to do. Okay. So now from this end, we can kind of scrutinize our nodes from then on out. Let's get rid of our transformation handles here so we can see things a bit more clearly. And so that one lines up, that lines up, that lines up, that lines up, that lines up, so we don't need that one or that one. Coming around the bend here, so I don't think we need that. We can go ahead and leave that one, but we don't need that one, or this one most likely, and we don't need that one. We do need to define the corner here. We're coming out of the corner, we're straightened back up. Let's maybe not even have one there. There we go. So I think that's going to get us. Let me double check. I think that's good. So let's take a look. Isn't this so fun? It's a process, folks. It's a process. Coming around the bend, we do want to swamp our rails because we do definitely want it to come from the inside out. When we come back over, we're going to clip those couple of stitches there. And yes, I'm happy with that. So apply and quit. So our letter L is now complete. What's left here? What are all these pieces? So that's the little swoosh. That's the big L. We'll call it the big L. And then this is our A pieces. So let's call it letter A1, letter A2, and letter A3. Okay, so that's taken care of. And now we have the bloody P, letter P. Okay, so big L we know is going to stitch first. So there's big L. And then A1, 2, and 3. And then that's going to stitch basically last. as is that. And we'll call this mini line, and we'll call this big line. Okay, and so now we have A1, 2, 3, and then we're going to have our letter P. And yeah, so when we get to the rest of it, we'll sort all those different elements. So for the P, how are we going to handle the P? And this one's tricky. So we just have to kind of mentally think about exactly how this is going to work. So first of all, let's break it there, and then break it some more. And so this piece here is going to be the first satin column. So these two pieces have to be combined, and we will combine those. And then we will create a line segment between that and that, Alt J. And then we can break it apart here. We are going to come down here and have this extend beyond the big line. The big line will cap that, so there will be definitely no gap there. So that's taken care of. And then we're going to come up here and we'll do Shift B to break it there. And we'll get rid of this one because I don't feel like we need it. Let's straighten that line out, make it a curve, and we can kind of fine tune. We'll add one here. We don't need that. And we don't need that. We will show our transformation handles. There we go. And so this piece here, not sure why. There we go. So we'll go ahead and, how did that happen? Let's see what we got going on here. Something is amiss here. So we need this piece and this piece combined into one. And then where these two meet, we need to join those. And now, I think, okay, so that piece was separate too. Let's see here. What's going on here? It is separate. So let's go ahead and combine that. So now we have what we expect. No, we still don't have what we expect. Why is that? Yes. But that needs to be joined together. Join selected nodes. So now when I pull that apart, yes, okay. So now this piece should be converted to satin. Whew, that took a little bit of thinking there. And sure enough, satin it is. Okay, so now the next piece. So the way this is going to work for our letter P, it's kind of like the E, but only different. So we're going to start here. We're going to come around, through, around, up. Okay, so that's how it's going to work. But how do we bust this all up into pieces to make it do what we want it to do? We want it to come around, up and through. Interesting. Well, we have a couple of options. And this is going to kind of introduce us into something that's a little bit different, but I think it's okay to do for this example. So I'm going to grab my pen tool, because I think it might be the simplest solution, but I'm going to grab my pen tool, and I'm just going to click, click, click. Now just follow along with what I'm doing here. Don't think too much about it right now. It'll make sense, or it won't. Okay, so did you see what I did there? Let's maybe change our outline colors so it's a little bit more distinct. Okay, so now all I'm going to do here is switch over to my node edit tool, and I'm just going to push this all out a little bit. I don't know exactly if we're going to use this necessarily, but I thought this might be an easier way to demonstrate what we could do. Okay, so you see how this path is coming around and kind of overlapping itself and out, right? So now if I give this a thickness, so let's just do, I don't know, what? Let's try 4. Ooh, that's too much. All right, 2.5. Maybe not enough. Too much still. 2. Let's leave it at 2. I'm happy with 2. Okay? So what we have right now is just a big, thick stroke. So if we go under extensions and InkStitch, there is a, see it says tool stroke, and it says convert satin to stroke. Or not, but that's not what I want to do. I wanted to go the opposite way. So back to InkStitch tools. We're on stroke. It says fill the stroke, convert satin to stroke, tool satin. Tool satin. Convert line to satin. Okay, maybe that's it. We could try that. Because that's what it is. It's a line. And okay, so it did convert it to satin. But you could see what it also did. It put in a bunch of nodes, and it put in a bunch of rungs, which we don't like. But I just want to show you the satin stitches that were generated. So you see, it starts off, we're going to swap the rails first of all, because it should start from, let's see, how is that stitching? Yes, it's coming around, and then it's going to go over itself and finish off, okay? So anyhow, that's what we ultimately need to have happen, okay? I am going to go ahead and use this just as an exercise in craziness. How do we do this if we were going to do it manually in InkStitch? Or in InkScape rather. So what we're going to do here is just think about where our issues are. So we need to definitely have a break here. Okay. And then this needs to be broken down here. So first of all, let's turn this visibility of this off, because that's just in our way now. All right. So we have this piece here. We're going to break it right there. Okay. And then this piece here, we're going to break it right there. Okay. And then this piece here, we're going to break it right there. And then I'm going to select all this stuff and break it all apart. So Shift Control K. So what we have here is we need this piece. We need, okay, so that is broken right there. So we're going to come in with that a little bit. And we're going to come in with this a little bit. So we're going to come around. And then we need this piece connected to this piece. So let's do that. So we'll go ahead and combine. And then from here to here, we need to create a segment, Alt-J. And then what we need to do is we need to get rid of this node, and maybe even that one. And so now this is going to come up and around. Now this needs to be part of the equation. So let's go ahead and combine it. And then this right here needs to be filled in. Okay, and so now we'll go ahead and get rid of that. So now we're going to come up and around. Okay, but now what do we need? Well, we need this to connect with that. In order to do that, we need to break it here. So you see how it's broken there? So we need this to now connect with this piece way out here. So to do that, we need to go ahead and combine those two. And then we need to take that line right there and this line right here and fill in that segment. So we need to come, so we're coming around like so. And then this piece, same thing. So we need to take this piece here and it needs to be combined with this piece here. But then we need the end of this and this to be connected. Now, I don't think we're going to need that or want that. But so then this here, this piece here, actually needs to be connected to this piece down here. But in order to do that, we need to connect everything together. So then this piece here needs the line segment from this piece here. So we will go ahead and select both of those, and we will add that line segment. Then we can get rid of that, and let's just make that a straight line. There we go. And then that we'll make that a cusp. That'll help us a little bit in our planning here. Okay, so this has got to be clear as absolute mud at this point, but now we have a path that comes up around, down and around, and through. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete that. Let's go ahead and show our transformation handles. Okay, and now I think we're ready to scrutinize our nodes a little bit, and we should have what we need. So down here, of course, we want to straighten that out a little bit. Let's get rid of our transformation handles. Those can get in the way. So we have a match there, a match there, a match there. We'll call it a match there. We'll add a match here. We'll bring this one around. We'll get rid of this one. This is, so we need one down here. Then this one has to go away. This one, we should have one here. This one, we should have one here. This one, we do have. Go ahead and get rid of this one for a second, and then we'll add it back in. So there, there. Then we need one here and here. Then this one here, we'll get rid of, and we'll add one right there. But we added it to the wrong side, so we need it here. So we'll add one here, and then we'll get rid of this one. There, then this one up here needs a pair. And then finally, we'll add one there, it'll pair. And there we go. So now, in theory anyhow, that should give us the proper satin stitches. But you could see how kind of crazy that was getting there. But at the end of the day, we do have what we need. Okay, and that's ultimately what the goal was anyhow. All right, so now let's go ahead and turn on those elements. And remember our E, once we had the E digitized over here, we were just going to duplicate it and move it over here. And then what we'll do is we'll take this and nudge it over just slightly so everything connects like it's supposed to. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just have this overlap just a little bit more. So you see how that's going to cap, and then we will slide our E here over just a pinch to cap that L. We can move over our L just a little bit more to cap our E there. Then that looks good. That's going to cap nicely. That's going to cap nicely. Bob's your uncle. We are basically pretty well done. Now this is the, let's see here. So this is, we need this to stitch. How do we want that? I think we do want that to, so I think the way we want this to stitch is we've got the big L and then A, 1, 2, and 3, which is fine. And then we want letter P, and we're going to call it P2 because that is the second piece of the P. And this we'll call it letter P1, but it's going to be the last thing to stitch. So it's going to do P, and then it's going to do E. So, and then it's going to do L. And then it's going to do the second E. And then it's going to do why does that say letter A? Because that should not be like that. So we're going to delete that, and basically we have to duplicate all of this. Yes. And then finally, to finish it off, we'll do the last bit of R. And then big line, middle line, the big line, mini line can go up here. So then our text layer can go up here. So now our fish parts, we're going to go ahead and turn on our fish outline, and we're going to turn on all of our fish parts here. And then we're going to sort how we want our fish parts to stitch. So I think I'm going to have this one first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. So we'll go to extensions, we'll choose InkStitch, we'll choose edit, we'll restack the objects in the order of the selection. And now we should be able to see how this whole design is going to stitch. So let's go into params. I like to go into params versus the stitch preview and take a look at how this is going to stitch. I am going to slow it down here. So let's back up here and just kind of scrub through it. So our first bits of our, and notice that that piece there is starting on the top right. So now we're stitching the L, A. That all looks nice, right? So you happy with that? So that all looks good. Okay. So the design itself, you know, looks okay, but it's not. And this is another whole topic of why, you know, it's just a complicated thing. Okay, so what is the issue that we're going to have? Well, we have an issue. And the issue that we have is right now, everything looks good. Everything's satin stitches. Everything is like we want it. but it's not ready for our embroidery machine. And this is the whole other part of digitizing, and that is routing and pathing. And that's something that is really, 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 really important, especially if we're creating an embroidery file for doing multiples. If this was just a one-off, it may not be that big a deal, but if we were doing multiple pieces, it becomes a huge deal, what I'm about to show you. So once you get the design to this point, the next step is to make it embroidery friendly. And so what we have to do is we have to look at our frogs. The frogs are our enemy. So let's click on Froggy. Click on Froggy. And here's what we're looking at. Okay? Here's what we're looking at. We're looking at all of these frogs. Okay? And that is a lot of frogs. Okay? And what else do we see? We see all of these stitches, these big long pieces of thread going every which way. Okay? And that is not good. This is not embroidery friendly. So if we have an embroidery machine that does not do automatic thread trimming, okay, then we have an issue, because we're going to have to go back and manually clip each one of these threads. Okay, time is money. If I got 100 aprons to make, I'm going to sit there and clip all them threads. I don't think so. I would not want to do that. I may ultimately have to do that, but I would not want to do that. So that becomes very, very problematic. Okay, and if I click on my info tab, you could see here a little bit more specifically, we have 20 jumps. Okay, we have 6,700 stitches, which isn't that many stitches, but we have 20 jumps. And right now we don't have any thread trims. Okay, 20 jumps. And so that means we've got 20 pieces of thread going every which way. Now, why is this not really a good thing? Well, I'll give you an example here. From the A to our P, we have a thread jump. Okay, so if we left that as a thread jump, then when we come to do the after our P is stitched, the very end, we add this column. And when we do that, now we've trapped this thread underneath, because we're going to stitch right over this jump stitch. And that's not desirable. So there's a whole other part of this design, and that's routing and pathing. What do we do with this mess? How can we clean it up? And like I said, that's just another whole part of the puzzle that, yeah, it's just not something that's fun. So yeah, it's a real challenge, but I will make a separate video to talk about routing and pathing. But as far as converting it to embroidery stitches, we've got that done. Now, we have not gone in and added any underlay, although I don't think this particular design, maybe some zigzag. I might throw some zigzag underlay under it, but because the satin columns are so small, I don't really think that underlay is all that necessary. But if I were going to throw some underlay in, it would probably be some zigzag underlay. And I would probably add 10% pull compensation across the board. I would definitely do that as well. But other than that, we're there on the embroidery side, but we do need to clean it up with routing and pathing. So I don't know if you made it this far, great. But hopefully you learned something along the way, because it is a whole process. But in the end, we got there. Thanks for watching.